Hi, I'm Larissa from Beekeeping Made Simple. I was a beekeeper in Pennsylvania. I kept bees for 7 years for commercial apiaries and now have my own bee farm here in the Big Island of Hawaii. I am going to show you in this video how to inspect your frames. This is for people who maybe don't have bees yet or in their first few years of beekeeping and are maybe struggling with what exactly you're supposed to be doing as a beekeeper and how you can help your bees. I'm going to show you what is going on the frames inside your hive so you can properly inspect it, because ultimately your goal as a beekeeper is to help the bees accomplish what they're trying to do, and you can't do that unless you know what they're trying to do. Later on in this video I have a link. It's also down in the description below for our free identification guide. You can download that at our website, and that's something you can print out, put in your inspection notes, so that when you're out with the bees, you don't have to have all this stuff memorized. You can have the photos and the descriptions right there for you to glance at whenever you need to. So let's get started. So I'm going to pull out the first frame and see what we have. Now, inside a frame in your beehive, every frame, it's either going to be empty or it's going to have honeycomb. That's it. So your frame's either going to have nothing in it, or the foundation you chose to put inside, or it's going to have honeycomb. So right here we have honeycomb. Now within the honeycomb, that's really just the building block for the bees. It's like the empty rooms in a house. Either the bees are going to be putting food inside the honeycomb, which is nectar, honey, bee bread, or the queen's going to be going into that cell. She's going to be laying an egg. That egg could turn into a worker bee, a drone, which is what we call the males, or a queen bee. Now, the honeycomb is so where everything gets put inside. It's also what the bees walk on. The bees are using the honeycomb to get around the hive. The bees stand on the honeycomb and do a waggle dance. It's like the floor, the ladder, the stairs, the way for them to get around, because they're not flying inside the hive. They're walking around on the honeycomb. So this frame here, when I look at it, and you can always rotate the frame, it's a pretty foggy, cloudy day, which is nice for beekeeping. It's not raining, but it's also not sunny, which means you're not getting too hot standing out here checking your hives. But it can also make it difficult to see what's going on inside these cells because you don't have the sun. So you can either take your phone or a flashlight and hold the frame with one hand and shine a light inside to see what's going on, or sometimes you can just rotate the frame to help you. This frame is food, and usually the first and last frame in your box is going to be food. No matter what box it is, your first, your second, your third, your fourth, usually the first frame is food. And that's the case for this frame. Now I'll take it a little bit closer to show you. When you rotate the frame, if you see a shine inside the cells, and you can see inside the cells because there's no cap over them, closing them up, that means this is mostly nectar. This is what the bees are gathering from the flowers. It's got a lot of water, a lot of moisture in it. So it's not fully ready. It's not honey yet. The other thing you can notice when looking at a frame are the adult bees walking around on it. There are worker bees and there are some drones. The worker bees are going to be over 98% of the bees in the hive. There's going to be one queen most of the time, but sometimes two. And then there's going to be some drones sometimes. If this is early spring, mid-spring, most likely you're not going to see any drones. You'll also most likely not see any drones in the fall or winter unless you live in a warm climate. So when inspecting a honey frame, there's really not much to do. You're saying, okay, there's honey. We have an inspection sheet down in the show description. You can download from our website. And this helps you go through checking a beehive. So you would pull out this frame, see that it has honey on it, and put a check mark next to the word honey. If needed, you see a lot of bees on this next frame, you can put a little bit of smoke in the area to get them to move out of the way. If that's not necessary, then don't do it. You don't have to use more smoke than you think is needed. And I pull this second frame out and I can rotate it to see what's inside the cells. I'm also seeing cells with a capping over it. And so let's take a little bit of a closer look. This again is another frame of food. I'm going to see here. Now, if you can't see what's going on inside the cells, because there's too many bees on them, blowing it lightly, the bees get out of the way. It doesn't get them too upset. They really just don't like your breath. Right here is a capping over this cell. Now, when you see a cap over the cell, and which prevents you from looking directly inside the cell, there's only going to be two potential things inside that cell. Either honey or baby bees in that final stage before they hatch, which is the pupa stage. This one is a very bumpy capping. You can't see a definite hexagon shape over each cell. You can't really see entirely where one cell starts and the other one ends. That's how you know that this is honey inside. Now when I poke it, and there we see the honey dripping out. What's also on this frame is some bee bread, and that's what we call the pollen mixed with nectar. The bees bring it in, not in huge quantities, but some, and it's fed to the baby bees in the larva stage. That is the middle stage of development before they hatch. And in that larva stage, they need more protein than the adult bees need. And so that's why they get the pollen. You see here where you have some cells with an orange color or a yellow color inside. That is the pollen. And pollen can vary in color. I've heard of pollen being even blue from some flowers. Most of the time I'm seeing them in different shades of yellow, orange, or reddish color. And you can tell it's pollen because it will never have a capping over it. It will be a color, a solid substance. It won't be a shiny liquid, and it won't be a worm or an egg. The other thing we have here is a little queen cell. Now this is just a teeny little one right there. It's empty. If you held the frame upside down, you'd be able to tell it was empty, or you could squish it like I just did and see it's empty. You know it's older because it's brownish tan color. It's not a very white or light yellow color. And so when you see older queen cells, it's almost all of the time it's empty. It's also on a frame of honey, so it's not going to have an egg in it. It's probably not going to be a queen cell with a real queen in it. I call them the practice queen cells. And you sometimes see them in the hive, but they're empty and they're small like that. Now on the other side, we have some baby drones hatching. You see their heads poking out. So these are drones that just finished pupating. They are ready to hatch. They are fully grown adult drone bees. Now you know that they're drones as opposed to worker bees hatching because drones have very large eyes and they come out of a cell that has a dome capping. The worker bees come out of cells that are flat. Oh, and here is a great frame. So here is the first frame of brood, which are the baby bees. These first two frames were food. We saw nectar, we saw honey, and we saw bee bread. And now we see our first full frame of baby bees, what we call the brood. This is all brood in the final stage, the pupa. Over here, you'll see the drone cells. They're larger, they have that dome capping over them. And then over here, we see the pupating worker bee cells. They're a lot smaller. They have a very flat capping. Do you see the difference between the drone cells and the worker bee cells? This frame is more brood, and this is typically how the beehive will work. The first 1 or 2 frames will be food, and then you'll have a big section of brood, and then you'll have 1 or 2 frames of food before the end of the box. This frame again is a lot of capped brood, the pupa, but you'll see here on the side there's some white worms in those cells. These white worms are larvae. So the development of a baby bee is egg, larva, pupa, then it hatches. When it hatches, it's a fully grown adult bee. So the white worms are the larvae. When they have a capping over them, they're pupa, and then they hatch as a fully grown bee. Now when you're inspecting your hive, you don't have to pull out every single frame. See what's going on. You really just want to check for signs of all of the factors that you see on your inspection sheet, and then you can close up your hive. Here we have a good example of the queen's laying pattern. So you're checking for enough food for the bees. You're checking for signs of a healthy queen. You don't have to see the queen. And you're checking to see what their temper is like. You're checking to see the activity. You're checking to see if they need more space, and to see if there's any problems within the hive. So when you're checking the health of the queen, what you want to make sure is that you're seeing eggs, larvae, and capped brood, all 3 stages of baby bees. And you don't have to see any for the drones, just for the worker bees. And you also want to make sure that these eggs, larvae, and capped brood are in a healthy laying pattern. Now what does that mean? If you look at a frame with capped pupating bees, you'll see that you're going to have most of the cells with a cap over them. Sometimes maybe some of the cells will have larvae in them or eggs, and you'll see all 3 stages of baby bees. But what you don't want to see is a very spotty laying pattern. When you see that, you see a lot of empty cells and then the occasional egg or the occasional capped cell. This spotty pattern of baby bees means that you probably have an unhealthy queen. Another thing you could potentially see is signs of a virus. When you see that, you're going to look at a frame like this with pupating bees, and instead of seeing a nice solid thick piece of beeswax over the cell, you're going to see holes punctured in the cells. You might not even see a cap over the cell, and you might see the face of a pupating bee looking back at you. Now, since I haven't seen any eggs yet and not much larva, I'm going to keep looking through this brood box. If I was to see these already, I would leave this box alone. And so now here on this frame, I'm seeing lots and lots and lots and lots of larvae in very small stage, as well as larger larvae that are taking up the entire cell. And that lets me know that there is a nice healthy amount of baby bees and the larva and pupa stage in this hive. Here's more capped brood. Put that back inside. This frame is honey, which makes sense because it's the second to last frame inside the beehive. It's mostly empty. There's not much weight to it, but there is a shine to it. So now I'm going to look in the second box, because this upper box showed me a ton of capped brood and honey and worker bees and drone bees, but I didn't see any eggs yet. So I'm going to put all of the frames back and look in the second box. There were 4 frames of honey. They didn't have a lot of honey on them, but they had some weight to them. So in this box, we had 6 frames of brood, the baby bees, and we had 4 frames of honey. And that is more than enough honey to sustain these bees. Every frame in this box has comb built out on it. So, one thing I'm going to be doing, since it is almost spring, and here in Hawaii, the hives are growing, they're bringing pollen, they are expanding, is give them another box on top. So I just put a little bit of smoke, not only to get the bees out of the way, but their buzzing is getting louder, which means they're getting tired of me. Might partially be because of me talking. I think they're a huge fan of my voice. See on this frame that this is pollen and capped brood of drones. Oh, and there's the queen bee. Okay. You see her? She's a little bit darker in color, and she's not moving very fast. And there's a bee standing on her. I'm going to put this frame back because I don't want to annoy her. This does not happen often, but I have had a queen once in a while fly off, so I like to keep them out of in the hive, and don't keep them out of the hive for too long. So I found the queen, and there was a whole bunch of eggs on that frame, and this is what eggs look like. Now that comb was really dark, and eggs can be really hard to spot on dark comb. So if you're not seeing any eggs in your hive, especially in the springtime when the hive is small and there might not be a lot of eggs in the hive already, so the few eggs that are in the hive you're not seeing, don't be too worried, especially if you're new at this. It might take a while to spot eggs, and if you're seeing larvae consistently week after week, especially the smaller larvae, then don't worry too much about not seeing eggs, because the eggs hatch into larvae on day 3, so at least you know there was a queen in your hive 3 days ago. So now that I've seen food, I've seen a queen that's laying, lots of worker bees, a good population. I have an idea of their temper, of the activity. I know that they need space in the hive. I know they have enough food to sustain themselves. I've seen baby bees in the egg, larva, capped brood stage. I'm ready to close up the hive. There's nothing more that I need to look at, even though I didn't look at the entire bottom brood box. I'm just going to put all the boxes back on. And the lid. Oh, but first, since they do need some frames, I'm going to add an empty honey super on top. Put the beetle trap on it later. This box has 10 empty frames in it. Put it on top. And put the lid on. Okay, to sum it all up, pardon veil hair going on here. When you open up your beehive, you're going to go through the inspection checklist that I have that you can download in the link right here. And you're just going to go through the checklist and check off everything that you see in the hive. You are essentially checking to make sure that the hive is healthy or to see if there's signs of an unhealthy hive. When you open up the beehive, you're going to look at a frame and it's either going to be empty or it's going to have honeycomb on it. If it's empty, there's nothing to do. Move on to the next frame. If it has honeycomb in it, then you're going to look to see what's going on inside the honeycomb. Either there will be food or baby bees in the honeycomb. The food is nectar, honey, and bee bread. Nectar is going to be a cell that you can see inside, and it's going to be a liquid. It's going to have a shine to it. The honey will have a capping over that cell. And then bee bread will be open, just like the nectar, but instead of there being a shine to it, there will be a solid colored substance. Usually the yellow, orange, red color, but you can see a little bit different colors. It's just not going to be a worm. It's not going to be an egg. It's going to be a solid colored substance. It will have a little bit of a shine to it because it is mixed with nectar, but it will be a substance. If you're not seeing food, you're going to be seeing baby bees. Baby bees have 3 different stages of development before they hatch as an adult bee. They will either be an egg, a larva, or a pupa. Eggs look like this. They are very small. Don't be worried if you have trouble seeing them. A flashlight can help a lot to see them. Or some people choose to buy black foundation because the white eggs, they say, pop a little bit more. After the egg stage, after 3 days, it hatches into a larva. And a larva is a white worm. The larva worms are very small at first and then get larger and larger and larger. The really small larva worms are hard to see, but the way the queen lays is she goes in this spiral pattern and lays cell after cell after cell, and that's how she doesn't miss any cells. So if you're having a hard time seeing the very young larva but need to find it for some reason, look for the big larva and then look next to the big larva. Get your flashlight out, and that's usually when you will start to see the really tiny worms floating in a pool of liquid. The pupa have a capping over them, and the times that it can be tricky to tell what's going on in honeycomb are really when there is a capping over the cell, because there's a capping over the honey and there's a capping over the pupa. So how can you tell the difference between honey and pupa? Well, pupa has a very definite hexagon capping over each cell, like it was done each cell individually. When you have a capping over honey, it's kind of this bumpy capping that was probably done over multiple cells at once, and you can't see each definite hexagon shape under the capping. It can also be kind of bumpy and not very even, so that's another telltale sign. Or if you're maybe harvesting honey and really don't want to take a frame of baby bees, instead, you can always just poke a hole in one of those little cells. And if honey pours out, you see a shine inside, then you definitely know that you have honey, not baby bees. The other thing to know about when looking at your baby bees is that you can tell the gender of the bee by the way that the cell looks. So in the egg stage, it might be hard to tell the difference, but in the pupa stage, it's very, very easy. Drones will be, their eggs will be laid in cells that are bigger than the worker bee cells. And then the queen bee cell is a totally different size and shape. It kind of looks like a peanut shell, but smaller, and hangs vertically inside the hive. The queen kind of like hangs on her head, whereas worker bees and drones are perpendicular inside the frame, and they're kind of laying on their side. You're also going to be seeing adult bees walking around on the frames. The big one that people always want to be able to spot is the queen bee. Don't worry if you don't see her. It's very rare that you need to find the queen. You just need to know that there are signs of a healthy queen, which is seeing eggs, or at the very least those very small larvae. If you have signs of a healthy queen, then it's just as good as seeing your queen. If you see your queen, that doesn't always mean that you have a healthy queen that's fertile and laying eggs. So just seeing a queen in your hive is not good enough. You need to see signs that she is healthy and doing her job. When getting started and really working on your queen spotting skills, I recommend when you first pull out your frame, looking for the queen before you do anything else. Don't look to see if it's eggs or larvae or what's going on the frame. Pull the frame out, look at it for 5 seconds, look for the queen, flip it to the other side, look for the queen for 5 seconds, then flip it back around and look to see what else is going on the frame. It's really easy for the queen to hide under other bees, to go around to the other side, to just go into little crevices so you can't find her. Make it your #1 priority when first pulling out the frame to spot her if you need to spot her, or if you're looking to make help your queen spotting skills, because when you first get a beehive, it's small. And it's a lot easier to find your queen bee in a small beehive where there's maybe 10,000 bees, just a few frames of bees, than when you're looking inside a beehive like the one I just looked in, which is 3 supers. The population in that beehive is probably closer to 40,000 bees, and it's harder to find a queen there. And I have lots of tips for how to spot your queen, even if your beehive is that size. And that is in the queen spotting video, which is down in the show description in the resources section. So you want to see signs of a healthy queen. And like I mentioned, you have a laying pattern. You're looking at your cells. The pupa are the easiest to look at. You want to see lots of cells with the same thing going on. You don't want to see an egg once in a while. You don't want to see a larva once in a while. You want to see a frame of larva, or a frame of larva and pupa, and lots of baby bees all together, not spotty. That is a healthy laying pattern. You also are, when you're pulling out frames, are the bees attacking you? Are they aggressive towards you? Or are they going about your business? Because an aggressive hive is a sign that there's a problem, just like with people, when you don't feel good, you're cranky. It's the same thing with bees. When they have a problem, they're usually cranky too. Other thing you're looking at is the activity. When you are, before you even open the hive actually, how many bees do you see coming and going from the entrance? In the early spring, when the hive is small, it's normal to see very little activity. But when there's lots of flowers blooming and your hive is full, you should see lots of activity. And then in the late summer and fall, when there's not so much blooming, the activity will go down again. So that's pretty much what you're going to see. Now, there are pests within the hive. You should not see any of them. If you are seeing them, that can be a problem. You should not see varroa mites. Even if you have an infestation, it's unlikely that you will see varroa mites. If you do see varroa mites on the pupating bees or on adult bees, that is a problem. Check our video about how to do a mite test, because there's a good chance you have an infestation, and you should have a plan for what to do about an infestation, whether you are treatment free or not. Another common pest that you will see in the hive, and is not too much to worry about, is the small hive beetle. Here in Hawaii, we have no frost, and so the small hive beetle population is incredibly high. It is very normal to take the lid off a beehive and to see lots of small hive beetles scurrying out of the crevices that they were in, and we have small hive beetle traps on our hive all the time. I have a link to the video about my preferred small hive beetle traps. They're nothing to worry about. The only time you have to worry is when you see small hive beetle larvae and slime. This is what it looks like. If you see this in your hive anywhere, I don't care if there's baby bees there, take it out. If you do not use foundation and it's not on the entire frame, you can just cut out the part of the honeycomb with the slime. Just make sure you are not leaving anything with small hive beetle larvae or slime inside your hive. If you're having trouble telling where the larva is, sometimes they can hide. You can poke through some of the cells near the slimy area and see if you're seeing small hive beetle larvae. You want that out. If you're ever seeing any kind of webbing across your cells, that is a sign of wax moth. If you are seeing really large worms crawling around, they are considerably larger than the small hive beetle worms, you want to take that out. And wax moth is really easy to prevent. You just want to make sure you're not putting old equipment with beeswax on it inside your hive. If you have frames of honeycomb or frames with beeswax on it, put it in the freezer for a couple days, take it out, then put it in the hive. It's okay if it's cold. It's better than feeding your bees wax moth. And then there is foul brood. That will mean that the brood looks stringy and kind of grayish and it smells foul. If you have that, you have to burn the entire hive and report it to your state apiary department. If you're thinking about getting started keeping bees, check out our free getting started guide at beekeepingmadesimple.com, and it has the 7 steps that I recommend you take before you buy your bees. If you'd like to see more beekeeping how-to videos, we update them every week, so hit the subscribe button, and then I think there's a bell you're supposed to hit, and that lets you know when new videos are actually out. Thanks for watching. Bye.